Yo, this title isn't a joke. If you're an average person, you probably hate school, right? And honestly, I kind of think that this internal feeling is kind of right. I'm not just gonna yap this video. I'm actually gonna give valuable advice to actually reverse this damage that school causes, which you don't even realize. The past month, I did a ton of research, and my mind was just absolutely blown by how school actually makes you brain dead. One of the worst things about school is actually marks. You might be thinking I'm crazy, but hear me out, okay? The first bad thing about marks is the fact that it actually negatively reinforces mistakes, right? You get punished for making mistakes in school. What does this do? Well, it actually makes us scared to make mistakes. Now, you might be thinking that's a good thing. However, mistakes are actually the foundation of success, of creating, of doing anything out of the ordinary. And by punishing mistakes and negatively reinforcing it, we pretty much create people who are so scared to take any risks possible. It's absolutely just strips away everyone's creativity, which is absolutely insane if you really think about it. So many people have talked about how after going through the education system, they've completely lost all their creative abilities. And that's because of school punishing us for making mistakes, when in reality, mistakes are the foundation of success. Any single time you make a mistake, it points you towards the right direction to go. Rather than punishing it, you should actually be rewarding people for trying something and taking risks. The second bad thing about marks is actually the fact that it actually rewards you for doing the so-called correct thing. Now, you might be thinking also, that might seem like a good idea. However, studies have shown that when people are rewarded for doing an activity that they're intrinsically motivated for, meaning like if you do something that you genuinely like, but then are given a reward, studies have shown that people literally lose their intrinsic motivation for doing that activity. This means that if you give a reward to someone for doing an activity, they start doing the activity for the reward, not for the activity itself, meaning that they lose all intrinsic motivation for that activity. So what does this look like in school? Everyone hates learning today, right? Because we are doing learning specifically for the marks, for the reward. And we've always been trained that way. Now, everyone who steps outside of school is so happy to not learn anymore. And that's absolutely horrible. Marks not only destroy your creativity when they punish you for mistakes, but it also absolutely destroys your intrinsic motivation for any internal curiosities that you've had throughout your life. So essentially, the worst belief that anyone can have is that their worth is attached to their grades. Stop believing that a number can define you and you can actually escape from like how bad marks can actually affect your brain. One of the worst things that marks actually cause is something called distress. So there's two types of stress, eustress and distress. Eustress is like the good type of stress that keeps you alive, right? For example, if you were walking on the edge of a cliff, you'd have a lot of eustress because that type of stress would actually be trying to keep you alive and it's natural. However, distress is not natural and it raises something called cortisol, which is a stress hormone in your body. And essentially, cortisol literally raises the chance of death from literally everything, from like heart attacks, high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever, stroke. Everything that you can think of, cortisol, when it is raised, it will increase the likelihood that you die. And since this stress causes cortisol increase, you pretty much increase your chance of dying the more you worry about grades. However, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get you to have a worse mark by telling you to worry less about your grades. I'm just saying worrying too much about your grades literally kills you. So, how much do you actually worry about your grades? If you feel stressed at all in school, then that's actually too much. I actually stopped feeling stressful at all in school. Even when the teacher is handing out a test, I just don't feel stressful. And that's partly because I already am confident about my mark, but it's also partly because I care way less than I did before. So how much should you actually care about your marks? So there has to be a balance, because if you care too little about your marks, then you'll literally just not perform well at school at all, right? So when you get your test back, I think that the most that you should care about is their mistakes. So look at the mark, but don't actually really care about the number, because that number does not define you in any way. It doesn't really matter. What you should care about is the mistakes that you made, and specifically what you didn't know, because probably what you didn't know on the test will come up for the next test or on the exam. You care about these so that you can fill in those specific knowledge gaps, and that's pretty much it. You don't need to worry about your mark or anything, because that number does not accurately define you at all. By the way, this advice is only for those geeks out there who care way too much about their mark, that to the point where they literally cry over tests. I'm not saying most people should follow this advice, because a lot of people literally just don't care about marks at all. And I think even though school is not that important, you should focus on improving yourself to the point where you don't have to worry about school anymore. And the reason why I'm saying this advice is because I used to geek out way too much, and I used to care about my marks way too much, to the point where I was just stressed out chronically, and it's just not good for your health at all. The second thing in school that makes us all brain dead is actually a standardized curriculum. So a lot of schools actually ironically pride themselves on a standardized curriculum. They say that it's actually a good thing that everyone is learning the exact same thing at the exact same age. But the reality is, learning is optimal when it is self-directed. When we are intrinsically curious about something, we naturally are pulled towards it. We literally naturally do something called deep processing when we are curious. And by the way, if you didn't know, deep processing is a term in learning science which makes our brain learn quickly. So if we are intrinsically curious, we naturally learn things quickly, which makes a lot of sense, right? However, a standardized curriculum, ironically, is the worst possible thing for intrinsic curiosity, because what's two people at the exact same age, at the exact same time, are interested in the exact same things? It is so rare. Optimal learning, I believe, is self-directed. And there's no good arguments against this. And the proof that standardized curriculums are stupid is the fact that everyone keeps asking the same question. Is this going to be on the test? This literally proves that no one cares about what we're actually learning. Instead, we only care about the mark that it gives, and this is the way the system is designed. It's so ironic how an education system can call itself education when it's literally the worst possible way to inspire intrinsic curiosity, which is the best way to learn. However, even though school literally absolutely destroys your curiosity, there is a way to actually re-strengthen. If curiosity was a muscle in your brain, there is a way to actually re-strengthen that muscle and literally reignite your childlike curiosity again. How? Pretty much during school, you do something called disciplined curiosity, where you literally, even though you hate the subject, you force your brain to ask deeper questions. Pretty much disciplined curiosity will re-strengthen your curiosity muscle in your brain, which will make you naturally ask more deeper questions, which also spawns motivation out of nowhere. When you find out knowledge gaps in the things you're trying to learn, actually it makes your brain want to know these knowledge gaps. And what this does is it actually retrains your brain to be more naturally curious. It actually undoes the damage of the education system, which is so ironic. Bro, it's so stupid how we have to undo the damage of school. Like, who in the world had this idea? Okay, the final worst part of school, I think this is the absolutely worst, is actually the saying, do as you're told. So we are always told to do as we're told in school, right? Now, not only does this absolutely ruin everything that I've just been talking about, so curiosity, right? When you're being told what to do, you are naturally unable to explore your intrinsic curiosities, to explore what your brain calls you to do, right? So that just destroys our curiosity. It also destroys our creativity because, well, we're not told to be creative in school, right? We're just told to regurgitate whatever they're telling us to to learn. And finally, doing as we're told absolutely destroys our intrinsic motivation for learning, because when we're told to learn, we feel so powerless. We are actually biologically designed to not like being told what to do. Because every person does not like to feel powerless. We like to feel like we are in control of our situation. However, school just absolutely destroyed this by telling us what to do and forcing us to do it. So this one statement, doing as we are told, absolutely destroys everything that I've just been talking about. However, the absolutely worst part of this, I believe, is that it makes us actually want to be average. Most people today are hypnotized. Oh my god. Most people today are hypnotized to believe that they actually want an average life, and you might actually be one of them. But do you even know what average is like? Average is like working a 9 to 5 job for like 7 years, and then you can enjoy your life. Oh wow, how great of a life that is. Average means that you never stand out from anyone. You never make big achievements. You never do anything out of the ordinary. No one has ever changed the world doing what everyone else has told them to do. When school forces us to be obedient, they constantly positively reinforce us sticking with the group and negatively reinforce us from straying way too much off the group. This system of training obedience constantly controls us and makes us believe that doing what everyone else does is actually a good thing, and straying too far away, being weird or abnormal, is a bad thing. However, being not normal is the best thing you can ever do in your life, because if you were normal, no one would ever look at you. No one would ever notice you. You would never stand out. So we've all heard of the quote that our parents tell us. If your friend jumped off a cliff, would you? And it's obvious that when our friends do something obviously detrimental, we wouldn't follow, right? However, let me change the sentence. If your friend geeks out for 6 hours studying, literally doing nothing with their life to improve themselves, would you? And what I'm trying to tell you is that everyone around you is not improving themselves at all. All they're doing is buying into the fucking education system propaganda. They think that they're doing the right thing, when in reality, all they're doing is just wasting 6 hours of their life, not improving themselves at all. All they want to do is memorize things so that their number increases. Now, I'm not saying don't put any time into the education system. What I'm trying to say is wake up and realize that time spent on school does not improve you pretty much at all. And I believe that the best possible skill that you can learn today is to learn how to study quicker, so that you have so much more time when you are actually young to improve yourself in every single aspect. So this is why I give study advice on YouTube. If you want to learn more, you can actually join my Discord server, where I give weekly calls, and usually I actually give good study advice. You can probably believe me, because most study YouTubers don't really say that they hate school, but I actually blatantly admit it. And the reason why is because the more I hate school, the more determined I'll be to study less and less to make my study methods more efficient. So hopefully you can believe me when I say that I actually spend so little time on school, you won't even believe me. Oh, well,